Hi, I'm Lora Hart, and I'd like to talk to you today about rotary tools, motor tools, and the accessories that you can use with metal clay to finish your fired work. Rotary tools are motor tools that will more easily allow you to quickly finish your work. You can get a handheld micro tool like a Proxen handheld micro tool or a Dremel. People are probably more familiar with that name, Dremel. Or you can get what's called a pendant motor with a flexible shaft. A pendant motor just means that the motor isn't in your hand. It's hanging from some kind of a stand or perhaps from the ceiling. And usually pendant motors are a little bit more aggressive, more powerful than the kind that you can hold in your hand. The handheld versions are definitely less expensive, but they are not as powerful as I've been saying, and they don't have variable speed control. You can buy one with variable speed control, but you'll pay more for it. The base handheld versions are around $50 each. The handheld model with a variable speed is around $130. And if you want to get it so that it will hang, if you want a flex shaft for it, if you want a foot pedal for it, those are all accessories that you're going to pay extra for, but you're still going to be using the smaller motor. So I suggest that people look into a pendant motor. They range in price from around $60 all the way up to about $300. The best starter in the United States, the best starter motor, is one called Fordham. I'm sure you've all heard of that, F-O-R-E-D-O-M. And that starts at around $287, $288. I checked a couple of different sellers, vendors, and they're all charging the same amount of money, so you wouldn't necessarily get a break by buying from one rather than the other. Although Contenti this month, CONTENTI.com, has a gift with purchase, so that might be a cool thing. You can check that out. The rotary pendant motor kits all come with the pendant motor, the flexible shaft, the hand piece, which might be an add-on accessory, and the foot pedal, which would be an add-on accessory. So you get all of that for $287. You can also search Google for economy flex shaft. I checked on Harbor Freight this morning and did not see a link, so maybe they're out of their version. Contenti has an inexpensive version for, let's see, let me check my notes, $49. So that's great, and that comes with all of the various accessories, the flex shaft, the pendant motor, the hand piece, and the foot pedal. So you can check that out. American Science and Surplus also has one for $69.50. You also want to think about what kind of accessory tools they might have with them that come in the package that might be attractive to you, but oftentimes those tools are made for use by plumbers, which means that they're very, very aggressive, and you might not use any of the free accessory tools when you're working with jewelry. So that's something to think about when you're choosing a machine. Then there are so many fabulous accessory tools that you can buy for the flex shaft, for your rotary tool. If you do get a pendant motor, the first thing you'll want is something to hang it with. You can rig something from the ceiling, perhaps a bolt and a bungee cord, or you can buy a stand for around $20. They have stands that will screw into your bench top, tabletop, and they have ones that will clamp on with a C-clamp, which is what I've been using for the past 25 years or so. And it's not perfectly stable, but I like it. It works for me, and why spend more money on something that screws into your table if you don't need to? So that's a personal preference. If you look over here, I've got a lot of tools that I want to talk about. This thing, there we go. This is a carousel that you can put all of your little tools and bits in. These, of course, are the radial discs. I'm sure all metal clay people know all about these. They are wonderful tools. They come in a kit that you can get, radial disc kit, and each color is a different grit, from very coarse of 80 grit all the way up to very fine of around 8,000 grit. So these are wonderful tools, and I use them all the time. When I take a piece out of the kiln, this is actually the first thing I go to. I use the red radial discs, which are around 320 grit, to polish it up from the white appearance of the metal when it comes out, if we're talking about fine silver, to make it silver colored, bring up the high shine of the silver. So that's what I start with, and then if I want to go further than that, then I'll use the blue and the pink, and then the pumice is the flesh, and this light green one brings it to a really high shine. So you can check all of those different ones. Sorry. They also come in different sizes. There's one that's smaller than this. This is 1/2 inch. There are also ones that are 3/4 inch that you might think, well, I make small jewelry, maybe I can use a small tool. You have to be really careful when you're working with mandrels, the metal handle portion, this portion, that the metal never hits your work as it's spinning in the rotary tool at high speeds, because that will put marks and dings and scratches. You also have to be very careful with tools that have a center screw. That's how they attach, because that can also cause major problems with your work if you're not being careful. There are a few tools that you can get that do not have that kind of a screw. They're called mounted. They're permanently mounted to the mandrel, which is great, but when the tool is done, when it's expired, and these will all get smaller and smaller and smaller, as you use them, bits sand off and crumble away. So after you've used it, then you end up with a mandrel that can't be reused. So sometimes you might want to buy one of these, and sometimes you might want to buy one that you can screw on. So this is a pumice wheel that is removable. Pumice wheels, if you choose to get one of those, deteriorate as you're using them. So this has actually only been used a handful of times. So you would want to get the kit with lots of replacements. If you get the kit of the radial discs, it will come with one mandrel, so that you can change out the discs, and you would have to do it every time. So every time I wanted to go from white to yellow to red to blue to pink, whatever I'm using, I would have to take off the bristles and put on new ones. So I suggest you look in the catalog and see what number the mandrel that comes with the kit is, and then order a separate package. You'll get 6 in a package. And so you can set up all of your mandrels all on their own, with their own discs, like I have here. Pink and green and yellow, and all of them on their own separate ones. You don't ever want to use one of these radial discs alone. You always want to stack between 3 and 5. They are very coarse. If you hold it in one place, with one single disc on it, you're going to sand a groove into your work. So you always want to keep the tools moving, all of the tools moving, so that they don't abrade and cause flat spots, or they don't take away the texture when you weren't meaning to take away the texture. You can also get, for a starting tool, instead of using the red radial disc, you can get brushes, steel brushes or brass brushes mounted on these mandrels. And this is one of the tools that when the bristles are no good anymore, then the mandrel is no good anymore. Unless you want to reuse it and make your own stamps, make other tools with it, make a little burnishing tool. So these two things are actually the same brush. It's called a cup brush, and it comes in brass and steel. And the difference is that this one, centrifugal force wound up all the bristles so they're going in a specific area. And perhaps I used this one on the inside of one of my little boxes and it just got all jumbled. So at some point you can buy the metal wire brushes in straight or crimped, and that puts a different finish on it, allegedly. But once you've started using these, you can see they change shape, they get crunchy, they get whirlwinded into this little cyclone kind of a thing, and so the texture of the wires change anyway. So I just always get the straight ones. There is also a wire brush called an end brush, and this is what it looks like new. Goes straight up in the air. And this is my little cyclone version. You can hardly even see that there are any bristles there. So these are great for getting into tight spots. It's really good for getting to the inside of a bale, or right next to a bezel in that corner between the bezel and the base plate. I like these a lot. The brass and steel brushes are also available in a shape that kind of looks like the radial disc. It actually reminds me of a chimney sweep because I've watched Mary Poppins way too many times. And I don't like those because the way they're assembled in the factory, the little wires fly off and get in your clothes and get in your eyes and hurt. And even if I am able to brush most of those little wires away, I'm afraid that they're sticking in my clothes, and then I get afraid that my cats will eat them or something like that. So I just don't use those ones that look like chimney sweep or radial disc. Another tool that I love is called a split mandrel. So that's just a piece of steel with a split in the side. Can you see that split? And that is used to put a strip of sandpaper on. So let's say you made your piece and it's beautiful on the front, but there are marks on the back. There's no texture on the back, but there are marks you'd like to get rid of. Using sandpaper of any grit with one of these tools, put it in that white little area there, really speeds up the sanding process. So that is a wonderful, wonderful accessory to have. Another thing that you can use for sanding, this is called a snap-on disc because it snaps on and off. Comes right on, comes right off. The only thing, and it can be used either way. You can put it on upside down and work on your piece from the underside as well as working on it from the top. The only thing you really have to pay attention to with these is that very, very few of them are marked on the back. This is a kit that I bought 10 years ago or something, and all of the sandpaper, dropped it, is yellow. I can't tell the difference between the grits. So you do need to be careful with that. You might want to order a kit of fine and then mark it on the back, mark all of them fine, or put a drop of nail polish that will denote the coarseness, the grit on each one of those little sandpaper discs. But I do use those a lot. Other than that, I use drills a lot. You can get drills that come in a little box that have an assortment of them. Or you can just get a package of the most popular drills that you might want to use. Probably if you're using a drill, it's because you want to put a jump ring through it. The jump ring is a specific diameter, a specific gauge. So for instance, if you're using 18 gauge wire, you actually probably want a 16 gauge drill because the wire needs to, the hole has to have a little bit of room in it to move around. If, on the other hand, you're riveting and you want to use 18 gauge wire to rivet something, the wire wants to be very, very tight in the hole. So you would want to use 18 gauge wire with an 18 gauge drill, which is 1 millimeter. If you are not sure how to match up the measurements, if you'll look in your Rio Grande catalog at the wire section, the wire is always noted by gauge, by millimeters, and by inches. So you can cross-check any measurement by looking at the wire description, which is a wonderful trick that I discovered a while ago. It's really been helpful for me. What else? You can get a little container like this. This holds all of my gem setting burrs. You could also, if you end up buying the drills separately, you could buy a little one of these. I happen to get this one at Cool Tools, but I'm sure many other vendors sell them. So you could get one of these to put all of your drills in, all of your other kinds of burrs in that are similar. They won't obviously work for these because the heads of these are too big for the little containers. But there you go. As I'm looking around at my tools, I'm seeing these really big slotted mandrels. These are made by Wolf. So these would be great for the inside of a ring, but the mandrel on them is much bigger than the usual 3/32 mandrels, which would mean that you'd need to have a chuck that can open and close in to fit many different size mandrels. So for that, if you're talking about the Fordham kit, you would want a number 30 handpiece. And if you're talking about the Fordham kit, you would want the SR kit that comes with the number 30 handpiece and a foot pedal and all the other accessories I was talking about. If you are looking at the economy versions, you want to check that they have a variable chuck system. I'm forgetting the name of what that little mechanism is called. So those are the majority of the things that I use. There are many other wonderful tools that you can use. There are wonderful little tiny pins that can get into any tiny little crevice. That cut in a very heavy grade or very, very fine grade. I really suggest that you get a Rio catalog and one day just sit down and go through it page by page by page and see all the amazing tools there are. And if something catches your eye, go onto Metal Clay Now or ask me and say, what is this tool? It looks really cool. How can I use it? Do you use it? So there you go. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope this has been helpful and educational. I'll put it up on YouTube in a few hours. And thanks so much for coming.